Good morning, everyone. This is RAYAC Executive Officer Shanna Terroso, and I am coming to all of you today to share this quick video about the new guidance about best practices for real estate during COVID-19. So we have some very exciting news to share. Yesterday, on May 19th, Governor Wolf issued a new statewide real estate guidance that applies to all real estate transactions in Pennsylvania. So this new guidance that was issued yesterday essentially opens up the real estate industry across the Commonwealth, and it no longer matters in terms of whether or not a county is in a yellow phase or a red phase. This applies equally to all of the counties across the state of Pennsylvania, and the guidance that we now need to follow in order to practice limited in-person real estate. So that document that had been out there from April 28th, the memo from the Department of State, those rules no longer apply. So you no longer need to concern yourself with anything that was in that document. Everything I'm going to be talking to you about today is going to be in adherence to the new guidance that has been developed, that's in effect right now across the entire state of Pennsylvania. So who is covered? So all businesses in the real estate industry are covered, which includes real estate professionals, appraisers, notaries, title companies, settlement service providers, escrow officers, home inspectors, mortgage loan originators, processors and underwriters, and the other necessary office personnel, including IT professionals and back office staff necessary to maintain office operations. The other big news is that this applies to all real estate, not just residential real estate. So this is a big change from the guidance that was in place. So this applies to all real estate equally. Most of the things that I'm going to cover today would be utilized in a residential real estate transaction, but there is some additional guidance that PAR has put together for multifamily homes, tenant-occupied properties, and commercial real estate. And so for those practitioners who are specializing in those particular pieces of the real estate industry, I would highly suggest that you take a look at PAR's best practice guidance and look at those particular sections and how it relates to your industry. So while we're talking about the documents, there are 3 documents that all of our members should be reading and familiarizing yourself with. So the first is the May 19th guidance for business in the real estate industry permitted to operate during COVID-19. This is a brand new information that was released with Governor Wolf's executive order as of yesterday, May 19th. So the way to keep this in mind is this is really the guidance that you need to follow when you're practicing in the field and doing that in-person real estate in the field. You need to look at this document, you need to read it over and see what the required and suggested guidelines are as it pertains to that information. The second document is the May 4th guidance for businesses permitted to operate during COVID-19. This also covers all businesses, not just real estate, but all businesses who are going to be operating during COVID-19. So you might look at this document as this is what your physical office operations need to be abiding to in addition to the May 19th guidance. And third, probably the most important of the 3 of these is what PAR has put together for the best practice guidelines for realtor members, and it takes and it compiles the information from both the May 19th document, the May 4th document, and their suggested best practices on how to conduct and perform real estate during this time period. 3 very important documents. This is what you should be looking at. We are also going to share the slides from this presentation so that you will be able to click on these links and gain access to the appropriate documentation. In addition to that, PAR had created 2 new forms. The first is the COVID-19 Property Access Notice, or the COVID-PAN. So this document is now undergoing some changes as a result of the governor's announcement yesterday and the new guidance from May 19th. So give this document a couple of days. Essentially what it does is it's a great document to utilize when you're talking with your clients about practicing in-person real estate at this time period, gives you the warnings, gives you the opportunity to talk about some of the different items that they should be aware of and what they will need to do to practice safely during this time period. But since the new guidance came out on May 19th, PAR is working to update this form in compliance with that new guidance and should have that available in the next couple of days so all of you can start utilizing it. The second form is the health screening acknowledgement. And this is a really great document that essentially asks, the 5 pertinent questions that you would want to know in case someone would have any of the indicators for COVID-19. So as part of the new guidance that was issued yesterday on May 19th, is that it is now required that you need to have a verbal health screening prior to entering the property. And for all properties, when you're doing any type of in-person activity, the participants need to complete a verbal health screening. So PAR is suggesting that in addition to the verbal, that you should have this written one, so it's covering your information that is available. Now, they aren't making any changes to this form, to my knowledge, but what you would want to do is utilize this form. And if you aren't going to use it in this form, your broker may want to tweak it to fit their needs. But the questions that are outlined in the form are probably the 5 questions that you would want to ask verbally, because you are required to at least do a verbal question over a health screening. And the 5 questions in there are probably the best questions that you should be utilizing with your clients before they're entering a property. So again, these forms are not required. They are a suggestion, and they are recommended that you utilize them. Okay, so here is some really important information that pertains to all in-person real estate activities. So good news here. The participants are limited to 3 individuals. So under the previous guidance, it had said 2 individuals max. PAR worked really hard and really conveyed this message that 2 just didn't make a whole lot of sense. We're able to get that number up, so now it's limited to 3 individuals. So 1 agent, 2 sellers. So big change here thanks to PAR's advocacy efforts. The second item is that all participants must wear face masks and use sanitizer. So this is a change. You will see that it does not reference gloves. It does not reference shoe covers or foot covers here. So that was under the old guidance under the April 28th document. This is updated. So the only thing that they must wear now is the face mask and the hand sanitizer. You may have sellers who still would prefer or require that people coming into the home do wear those other gloves or shoe coverings when they're in their property. Those are conversations you would have to have with your clients. And if your seller does want to require that in addition to the face mask, you would have to have a conversation about that being a necessity and who's going to provide those items before someone would enter the home. But according to the guidance, you need to wear a face mask, you need to use hand sanitizer, and that's it. You need to bring plastic bags to dispose and remove any personal PPE or other items that are brought onto the property. This is a big one. This new one is that you are required to maintain records of all appointments, including contact information for all participants. The reason for this is that if there was someone, let's say a seller develops COVID-19, that they would need to take the steps the state would need to take the steps in order to notify anyone who may have come in contact with that home during the time period who could have been exposed to the COVID-19. PAR's recommendation is that the listing agent and the listing brokerage should be maintaining a record of anyone coming into the property. Now that's their recommendation. You need to keep records of anyone who is coming in for the participants and when they're going through the property. But they say that the listing agent, PAR is recommending it is that the listing agent is to be the one to keep this record information, because it would be easier if someone is diagnosed with COVID-19 to have one person who has the list of all of the individuals who went through the property. We know that traditionally that listing agents don't have access to the buyer's information. And I know that there have been some concerns from members that sharing that buyer information with the listing agent, they don't feel comfortable with that, or their buyers don't feel comfortable with that. And so what PAR has said in response to that is, let's remember that the code of ethics is always applicable no matter how you're practicing real estate, and that any type of interference with a contractual relationship between another realtor and their client would be a violation of the code of ethics. So keep that in mind. You have to maintain records of all appointments, including the contact information, and PAR suggesting is that the listing agent should have access to that information so it is in one spot. You need to utilize CDC guidelines for cleaning and disinfecting facilities and providing that information to the clients. Again, this last item here is that you need to have a verbal health screening prior to every showing or any in-person activity. So yes, you have to do that verbal health screening. It's suggested that you use the PAR COVID-19 HSA form, and if you're not going to use that form, at least you should be asking those 5 questions that are in the form for that verbal health screening. Okay, so now we're going to move on to listing appointments. What are the best practices to utilize when undertaking a listing appointment? So first is do as much work as you can remotely as possible. Get as many of those questions answered so that if you have to do that in-person listing appointment, that you've gotten all of these other questions answered so your time in the property itself can be minimized. And even with listing appointments, no more than 3 individuals in the home. So 1 agent, 2 sellers. All participants must use hand sanitizer, and also they need to wear face masks during the listing appointment. You must complete the verbal health screening, and again, it is suggested that you use the PAR form, the HSA. You need to provide relevant safety information to the sellers to discuss the benefits and risks of allowing in-person activity. So again, a great form to use is the PAR property access notice would be one way you would cover that basis to provide that information to the sellers. You also want to have conversations with the sellers to determine if there are any additional instructions that are necessary on the property. For example, we know that it is required that everyone must wear a face mask and use hand sanitizer, but maybe the seller would like to add an additional requirement that they do have to wear shoe coverings. So what are those additional requirements that the seller wants followed? Conversations will need to be had with your clients about that information. Who's going to sanitize the property after the showing? Are you going to require that the buyer or the buyer's agent need to wipe down any surfaces that they touched when they were in the property? So this is a time where you need to have those conversations to see if there's any other additional requirements that the seller will have. It's important to note, though, is that the seller can make stricter requirements for the access to their property, but they cannot make them less. So the seller cannot say, you know what, I don't care, bring as many people as you want through the property at any time, not a big deal to me. They can't do that. So they can't say that. It is limited to 3 individuals, and all of those individuals must use sanitizer and wear face masks. Okay, best practices prior to the showing is that you need to encourage the use of virtual showings before scheduling an in-person showing. So make sure that the buyers are truly interested in this property, that they've done every way to view the property prior to the in-person to make sure that this is definitely one of the properties they want to consider. You need to advise, both the buyers and the sellers, again, of the risks involved of entering a property during COVID-19. Again, that property access notice that PAR has created would be a good form to do that. All the showings, this is required. All the showings have to be by appointment only. This is a big one. And just to make it adamantly clear, it has to be by appointment only. It's limited to 3 individuals. So and it also specifically states in the document from May 19th and that guidance, open houses, broker opens, completely prohibited. You cannot do any type of open houses or broker opens or broker tours of property. That is completely prohibited. So be clear on that. Appointment only, 3 individuals. And in addition to that, those showings need to be scheduled at a minimum of 30 minutes between each showing. So you can make it longer if you choose. It just can't be less than 30 minutes between each showing. PAR is suggesting that you might want to consider limiting the in-person showings to those who have been pre-approved for a mortgage. So One item to keep in mind though, if you are going to be requiring that the buyers are pre-approved before they can do any in-person showings, you need to do that equally to all of your buyers. So not just selecting which buyers have to be pre-approved and which ones do not. If you're going to do that as a best practice, you need to apply that equally to all your buyers across the board. In addition to that, any residents of the property and any buyers at the showing need to complete the health screening. So the verbal health screening notice, asking those 5 questions that are in the form, at least verbally, and if PAR again is suggesting that you use the health screening acknowledgement so that you have a written record of it as well. So best practices that you should do when you're at the showing itself. So make sure you're complying with the showing instructions. For your listing agents, a good place to put that again is in Bright MLS. You have the capability to put showing instructions in there. So anything that the seller is requiring above and beyond the guidelines that are developed by the May 19th document, that's where you'd want to put that in Bright MLS so that everyone is aware of what those showing instructions are, and you as a buyer's agent should comply with those showing instructions. At the showing itself, everyone needs to use the sanitizer and wear the face mask. Again, no more than 3 individuals present at the showing at any one time. 1 agent and 2 buyers. Do not leave behind any business cards, any materials whatsoever. You should be leaving behind nothing at the property itself. Agents and buyers are required. This is required. Agents and buyers are required to use their own separate transportation to get to the property. Sellers should vacate the property, but they can remain outside social distancing. So again, 3 individuals, 1 agent, 2 buyer in the home. Sellers should not be there. If they still need to be on the property, they can be outside social distancing. For occupied properties, it is suggested that the sellers should leave the lights on, open up all the interior doors. So the reason behind that is you want to limit the amount of things that buyers and the buyer's agents are touching when they enter the property. So open up those closet doors, turn on all the lights, open up the basement door, have everything open so they don't need to touch anything when they're going throughout the property. And then that's less sanitation and less things you need to go back over when they're doing the showing itself. More best practices during the showing. Again, avoid any physical contact with the property. So as buyers and buyer's agents going through the property, be very conscious of what you're touching and try not to touch anything. You want to ensure that when you're in the property itself that you are maintaining social distancing guidelines. So if there's a very small powder room, for example, all 3 of you shouldn't go into that powder room at one time. You want to make sure you're keeping that social distance while you're in the property itself. After you have finished the showing, you want to make sure to sanitize. Again, these are conversations that, you need to have. Who's going to be responsible for sanitizing? Is the seller going to be responsible for sanitizing the entire property after it's completed? Is the seller requiring that the buyers or the buyer's agents need to wipe down any surfaces that they touch? And if so, who's going to be providing the cleaning supplies so that the buyer or the buyer agent can touch it down? There's nothing in here who says who's required to do what, but these are conversations that you need to have and figure out what protocol is going to be followed with each of the properties. And one thing to keep in mind for the buyer's agent, don't forget about that lockbox. So make sure you're wiping down that lockbox after you touch it and after you use it. And finally, you want to make sure that you're minimizing the time spent in the dwelling. So any conversations that you have, potentially want to making an offer, do that off-site. Don't do it at the property itself. That's probably also a good practice just in case there's any type of, security cameras in the property. We suggest that anyway. Don't have those conversations in the property, but you want to minimize the amount of time that you're spent in the dwelling. You can have those post-showing discussions over the phone in virtual meetings. You don't need to do that at the property itself. Okay, so best practices at the closing and settlement table. So unless the agent is essential to the settlement process, steps should be taken to not have them attend if it's not necessary. Another big tip is to review any and all documents you can in advance to clear up any issues prior to getting at the settlement table. So anything you can do in advance, try to take care of it then. and doing that remotely rather than having to lengthen the amount of time that people need to spend at the settlement table. And attendees should utilize sanitizer and wear face masks during the settlement process. Another big tip is you want to check with your title company, your settlement company, and see what protocols they may have in place. I know there are a variety of different title companies and settlement companies who have different guidelines that they're following, so make sure you're checking with them in advance and sharing that detailed information with your clients. Okay, so consistency is the key to all of this. So as I indicated before, what you're requiring for one of your clients, you should require for all of them. So if you're going to require that your buyers need to be pre-approved before they can go and do in-person showings, you need to do that for all your buyers equally. You want to make sure that you're adhering to any and all fair housing guidelines so that you aren't treating your clients differently based upon one of the classes protected under fair housing. So treat everyone equally in this process and in the guidelines that you are developing. Now, going to shift gears a little bit, going into some best practices for your real estate office operations. So as I had indicated before, the real estate office operations are not only under the guidance that were developed on May 19th, but also the big guidance for general businesses that was issued by the governor's office on May 4th. So you need to follow those operations under both of those documents. Some of the best practices with that is that agents, appraisers, and employees should work remotely as much as possible. So wherever you can work remotely, continue to do that. You need to have separate work areas to maintain social distancing. You should be requiring people to use hand sanitizer when entering the building. You need to require that employees and agents wear masks at all times, and you as the employer will need to provide those masks or approve the masks that the individuals entering the building are using. You need to develop protocols for cleaning, especially the high touch areas in the office. You need to post any relevant and required safety notices that are required as a result of that May 4th document. Clients entering the building should be by appointment only. You should consider having agents complete any health screenings before they enter the building as well. Another big item too is that if any of the agents do develop or employees develop the COVID or test positive for COVID-19, they need to notify the broker and or office manager immediately with that information. You should not be bringing any food to share in the real estate office either. So please make sure that's not happening. I will also mention that the May 19th guidance also is very clear that you're not allowed to provide food at any of your in-person real estate activities either. Since open houses are prohibited, that's typically when food would have been provided. So again, no open houses, no food at the properties as well. Okay, so what do you do if someone does test positive for COVID-19? Well, all of the businesses under the May 4th guidance from the governor's office are required to develop a response plan if they are exposed to a probable case or a confirmed case of COVID-19 for their office location. And PAR is suggesting that you should use similar tactics in developing a plan for exposure at a seller's property. So you want to make sure that you're advising the seller to utilize the cleaning and sanitation guidelines from the CDC, and the brokers and agents need to cooperate with the notification process with the state over who has accessed the property and who could have been in contact with a probable or confirmed case of COVID-19. So RAYAC is providing resources for the PPE. So we are selling face masks, and we are selling packs of 10 of the disposable face masks for $7.75. It is limited to 2 packs per member, and we do have that available for purchase right now. In addition to that, we are also selling shoe covers. So those are $2.50 for a pack of 5, and there's 5 pairs in a pack, so it's a total of 10, 5 pairs in a pack, and you can buy 2 packs of that as well. We also have been selling bulk shoe covers where you could buy 50 or 25 pairs for $24.50. We are currently sold out of those. They are on back order. And we also have recently acquired gloves where you can buy a pack of 100, so 50 pairs for $19. So yes, we know that right now face masks are what are required, but we do know that some sellers may prefer that additional PPE could be utilized. You can purchase those items at the RAYAC office. In order to do that, you can contact Doug at rayac.com to make your order over the phone and to pay for it over the phone. And then we are arranging pickups at the RAYAC office so individuals can pick up that PPE. Unemployment compensation. I know there's been a lot of questions in regards to unemployment compensation and whether or not you have the ability to continue to file for unemployment compensation now that real estate is allowed to open back up. So PAR has been working diligently with the Department of Labor and Industry to get a lot of these questions answered. And look back for their website. They have a frequently asked questions section, and specifically to the unemployment compensation. They're going to be putting out some of the answers to these questions and guidance to these questions this week. Also, I know one of the big questions that we're going to hopefully have an answer to very soon is, when do you report that you received a commission? When it's earned, when the agreement of sale was signed, or is it when it is received, when you physically get the check after the settlement table? But any other questions that you are having outside of that, the best place to get those questions answered is this email, which is ucpua@pa.gov. And they are answering those questions within about a 10-day time period. Other big news is that the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission has received a waiver that will allow for CE classes to be streamed via a webinar. So RAYAC is working with our instructors, and we have developed a plan for the vast majority of our CE classes to transition over to a Zoom class on their already scheduled dates and times. So class attendees, you are all going to be receiving an email notification about the new class setup. And if anyone is interested in signing up for one of the Zoom classes, you can do so by visiting the RAYAC website. Just an update about the RAYAC office physical operation. So the physical office is going to remain closed at this time. All of the RAYAC staff members are working remotely and at our 100% capacity on serving you, the RAYAC members. So we haven't missed a beat on providing you the services and information that you need from us. All of the calls that are coming into the RAYAC office are being answered live by a RAYAC staff member during our normal business hours. So you can absolutely call into the RAYAC office, the phone number. We are answering all of those phone calls during business hours. As I indicated before, the RAYAC classes and committee meetings have transitioned to Zoom platforms. And so the committee meetings and the classes will continue to be held remotely. You can purchase items from the store, including lock boxes. And again, you can do that by contacting Doug at rayac.com. And then those items will be able to be picked up outside of the RAYAC office at pre-arranged pickup times. So we are committed to continue to provide you all of the services that you need to do your business, even though we are going to continue to work remotely for the safety of the staff and all of the members in keeping the RAYAC building closed at this time. So that is everything that I wanted to cover with you today. I hope you found that information to be helpful. As always, if you ever have any questions, you need any assistance or clarification, feel free to reach out. Best email is staff@rayac.com. Also, don't forget that RAYAC does offer a free legal hotline to our members through our solicitor, Peter Ruth at Stock and Leader. And so you are free to contact Peter with any questions that you may have about contracts, addendums, proper protocol during this time as well. So with that, I'm so happy that you're all able to get back to business to start selling those homes. I think it's going to be fast and furious for all of you. I wish you good luck, and I want to remind you all to please follow these guidelines. Please stay safe, and let's have a great finish to the spring real estate market season here in York and Adams counties. Take care.